this week. It will be the second such showdown over a justice since the president took office in January of 2017. This, as the White House says, it's using executive privilege to hold back more than 100,000 pages of documents related to Kavanaugh's time as a lawyer in George W. Bush's administration. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calls the decision a Friday night document massacre in reference to Watergate, and Democrats claiming Republicans are trying to force through Kavanaugh's nomination without the proper scrutiny. Let's go to CNN White House correspondent Boris Sanchez for more on the Trump administration's reasons for blocking these documents. Boris, what's the explanation?
Hey there, Fred. Yeah, William Burke, the attorney who's been charged with overseeing the release of these documents, wrote a letter to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley on Friday, essentially explaining why he chose to hold back more than 100,000 pages worth of documents related to Brett Kavanaugh's time here at the White House. His justification was constitutional privilege. He actually says in that letter that former President George W. Bush, who Kavanaugh worked for, asked him to be as transparent as possible in this process. Democrats, though, do not feel that has happened. You saw the tweet from Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, I should say. Beyond that, you have Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah putting out a statement this weekend about the release of these documents, saying that there have not been more transparency for other Supreme Court nominees, that the 400,000 or so pages that have already been released are substantial. Further, there are questions about where Brett Kavanaugh stands on a number of key hot-button issues, namely abortion and Roe versus Wade, something that the Trump administration has repeatedly promised to overturn. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina was asked about where he expects Brett Kavanaugh to stand on that issue on State of the Union earlier today, speaking to Dana Bash. Listen to what he said.
Well, here's what I hope he'll do. If there's a case before him that challenges Roe v. Wade, that he would listen to both sides of the story, apply a test to overturn precedent. Precedent is important, but it's not invalid. I'm dying to see if he believes that Citizens versus United can be overturned. The bottom line here is there's a process to overturn a precedent, and I think he understands that process. He will apply it, and if it were up to me, states would make these decisions. Not the Supreme Court, but it is a long-held precedent of the court. It will be challenged over time, and I hope he will give it a fair hearing.
The confirmation hearings for Kavanaugh begin on Tuesday. So far, President Trump has not weighed in on that this weekend, Fred.
All right. Thank you so much, Boris Sanchez. Appreciate it. All right, with me now is CNN contributor and former general counsel for the Federal Election Commission, Larry Noble. Larry, very good to see you. Let's start off with a reminder of why this is such an important Supreme Court nomination. So Kavanaugh replacing Anthony Kennedy, who cast the swing vote on several major cases. Talk to us about the significance and the level of importance of a confirmation of a Kavanaugh.
This is critically important to the court because Justice Kennedy was a swing vote on many important issues, including abortion, marriage equality, in some campaign finance cases. And really what you get here with Kavanaugh is Trump's opportunity to switch the court to a very conservative court and to take these decisions that have been 5-4 in the direction of upholding abortion rights, upholding campaign finance laws or certain campaign finance laws, and switching it around. You know, when they talk about precedent when you're dealing with the Supreme Court is good only as long as the Supreme Court says it's good. When you have 5 justices who say we no longer want to follow that precedent, the precedent is gone. So I think it's disingenuous for people to say, well, we expect him to look at these cases very closely and we expect him to follow precedent. I think the expectation is that, in fact, he will be now the swing vote to undo much of what Kennedy stood for and what much of the rest of the court stood for. So I think we're going to see, if he is confirmed, and I suspect he will be, I think we're going to see some major changes in the Supreme Court jurisprudence.
So, confirmation hearings beginning on Tuesday. Customarily, the U.S. Senate wants full transparency, but now we know reportedly there's this 100,000, documents the White House refuses to release. Executive privilege is the protection in which they can do that. At the same time, this was at the urging of George W. Bush's, lawyer William Burke, right, who who really was encouraging this, and I'm quoting now from a New York Times article saying that these documents reflect deliberations, candidate advice concerning the selection and nomination of judicial candidates, the confidentiality of which is critical to any president's ability to carry out this core constitutional executive function. So is this more so a protection of a prior administration as opposed to this White House feeling like it is protecting its candidate?
Well, we don't know without knowing what's in the documents, but my suspicion is it's protecting this candidate. They can release these documents if they want. They should release these documents. They are really rushing this through, and the concern is, what do these documents show about the type of advice he gave George W. Bush and where he stands on various issues? Because while he was advising George W. Bush, there were a lot of important issues that came up that will come before the court. So I think, the whole idea here is they're trying to rush this through as fast as possible. They obviously want to get it through before the election, and they are not only just shortcutting the process, they are depriving senators and the public from a full vetting of Kavanaugh.
And so with the president, or at least people around him under investigation, the special counsel probe, which have resulted in something like 39, indictments, and some including some guilty pleas. How much of that do you think, or questions about those things will be, peppered, to Kavanaugh? What's the expectation of how he can answer these questions without really undermining decisions that may potentially come, or challenges that may potentially come to the U.S. Supreme Court?
Right. The classic thing that they do is that they'll say that, I'm not going to make any statement about how I would rule on anything or discuss any open questions. But the problem with Kavanaugh right now is that he has expressed a belief in writings and in opinions in what you'd call a strong executive branch, a strong presidency, and that the president has a lot of authority. And even though he was involved with the impeachment of Clinton, he now has said that he doesn't think a president should be really subject to civil suits, and he thinks the president has a lot more authority than a lot of other people do. He doesn't really necessarily believe in total checks and balances. He doesn't necessarily believe in independent agencies. And that's really critical when you have a president under investigation. If he thinks the president has really this tremendous amount of authority to protect himself and is not subject to investigation, then what you removed in the Supreme Court is one of the checks on the president. If the Supreme Court just rubber stamps whatever the president wants in terms of stopping an investigation or limiting an investigation, then we really have a serious problem. And that's actually my major concern, is right now we have a Congress that doesn't seem to be really inclined to investigate the president. And if we have a Supreme Court who says that the Department of Justice really can't investigate the president because it's either outside their authority or because the president can shut it down anytime he wants, then the president goes on unchecked. And leaving Donald Trump unchecked is a really concerning thing.
Leaving any president unchecked, right?
Well, any president, but any president unchecked is a concerning thing. But you have a president here, by his own words, has said that he doesn't necessarily believe in the norms that have followed, that other presidents have followed. And we have not had another president who has attacked his own Department of Justice, the FBI, the intelligence community.